Hello and welcome back to Speed Demon Painting. Today we're doing the first video of the new ORBAT deep dives, but the new ORBATs have gotten quite big compared to what they used to be. So I've decided to actually split it up a bit, and the first one that we'll be handling is an Imperium faction, i.e. the Scandinavians. I've tried to reduce the number of rules to just those that are relevant to the actual Scandinavian models. So if you've got your eye out on, starting a fleet like this, I hope this video is useful to you and it helps you along your way to collect this particular subnation within the Imperium faction. Now, as always, the first thing we'll be looking at are the different qualities and rules that apply to the subfaction and the Imperium at large in this case. And the first rule that we'll be looking at is Voltaic. Now, in version 3.03, there was a change that critical hits no longer cause the opposing ship to also take a point of disorder, but Voltaic sort of rectifies this for the Imperium faction. If you're firing at them with a weapon that has the Voltaic quality, should the initial target suffer one or more critical damage markers, it will receive an additional disorder condition on top of whatever the critical damage marker is, of course. And if the initial target has any online shield generator, storm generator or guardian generators and suffers a critical hit damage from this action, then you automatically apply the generator offline critical damage marker and you don't have to roll for the result in this case. If the generator is offline, of course, you do have to roll for it as normal. And then there's a few other generic special rules that apply to the Imperium. The first one is disciplined. However, I'm not going to talk too much about this one because if my memory serves me correct, this rule is reserved mostly for the Prussian factions, as the Scandinavians are more about that up close and personal battle style, and they don't really have any disciplined crews. They have more the type of aggressive crews, more on which later. They do come with heavy firepower though, and like I discussed in the previous ORBAT changes, this now means that you can fire 3 weapons at the full lead value instead of the usual 1 in your dice pool. It is a valor effect though, so you do have to play a card, and it can be countered as normal should the enemy have any fortunes of war or similar rules, so be mindful of this. Another rule that is slightly tricky to understand for new players is Inductorium. Now, what does this do? Well, when a unit makes an attack or an assault with any Voltaic or Arc qualities, you have to count the number of exploding hits that you roll after the whole thing is resolved. So including any additional dice from exploding hits. If you scored more exploding hits than there were models in the target unit, then you get to make an additional number of attacks within the same dice pool, so you just add them to it. And the attack gains a number of action dice equal to the numbers of models in the target unit. So to clarify, say that you're shooting at a unit of 4 frigates, you roll all of your dice. Well, this rule kicks in if you've scored 5 exploding hits, again after rolling all of your dice. If you did though, you will be getting another 4 dice in your attack. This compensates somewhat from, having innately slightly lower dice, as we'll see in some of their attack profiles. And then the big one, the thing that makes them specialists in assaults, is the lightning assault rule. If any model in this unit attempts an assault action, it gets an extra assault action dice pool for every weapon listed on the assaulting model with either Arc or Voltaic quality. Now, if you're going through all the different weapons that the Imperium has, they have quite a few Arc and Voltaic weapons, so expect monstrous dice pools when making attacks with lightning assault rule. Supporting models, however, cannot use this rule, so don't expect to make monstrous supports as well. It needs to be on the initial assaulting model. And if the assaulting model has an online storm generator, you can add an additional +2 to its assault action dice pool. However, mind you, the storm generator is Prussian tech, and I haven't found it on any Scandinavian ships yet. Now, when you're building your fleet, you will of course need to use specific battle fleets as well, and the Imperium has lots of them, but seeing as we're sort of predominantly focusing on the Scandinavians in this one, I'm mostly using the rules here for those fleets that have Scandinavian ships on them. The only themed battle fleet so far for Scandinavian fleets is the Ragnarok battle fleet. Now, that is a battle fleet set that you can purchase, of course, and when you look at that one, you need to have a flagship unit with the Ragnarok class trait. Makes sense, doesn't it? That's where the name comes from. But if you're assembling those models, you do have to include at least one Gungir unit. So just the one will do. That's something that was changed all around in these new ORBATs. So if you bought this set, make sure that you build one of your plastic cruisers as this Gungir unit. And you can then include a further 3 units with the Scandinavian trait. And mind you, there's some fun stuff in here, because as we'll soon find out, Hogmeisters can now actually trade their Prussian keyword, or rather Teutonic keyword, for the Scandinavian trait as well. So you can include them in Ragnarok battle fleets, which is a fun little addition. And what is the bonus you get out of it? Well, all units in this battle fleet may double their drift during the movement step of the first round. So that Scandinavian battle fleet is all about closing the gap quickly and launching devastating assaults, and getting double drift in your first movement step is definitely going to help achieve that. And as an additional rule, you can include more than one Gungir class unit should you so desire. So the normal restriction in version 3.03 is that you can only include each unit once. This is an override of that. You can spam Gungir class should you so desire. And if you can't really fit your army in that, or you want to try something else, there's of course always the option to default back to the standard Imperium battle fleet. You have all the flexibility in the world, except for of course the new limitations that you can only include each unit once, you can only include one aerial unit, and you can only include one submerged unit, excluding flagships. And of course, like before, you can only include one flagship unit in one of these battle fleets. The big difference though is that you gain no bonus whatsoever in version 3.03, so that flexibility comes with no extra benefits other than flexibility. Now, as far as the Imperium outfitting yards go, it's very similar of course to the outfitting yards of the Imperium at large. You've got the Freya array, which means that you get some extra leniency in your unit coherency. It can be 5-inch rather than the usual 4, and you gain some extra ADV and SDV for including one. I think there was a few ships in there that had them, but usually those bonuses are already included in the profile if they baseline have it. A new addition to the roster is the Pflicht Aerial Escort. That's pretty much the smallest version of small Zeppelin escorts. The Scandinavians have access to them as well. Now, what makes these ones special? They are slightly more expensive than your normal escorts, but they can only be destroyed by catastrophic explosions if that catastrophic explosion was caused by a dice pool that actually had the aerial quality. So if you're being targeted by a bunch of, let's say, torpedoes with the submerged quality, they can't blow up those flying little escort tokens, which makes total sense. Storm Veins, I'm going to skip because that's some tech found only on the Prussian and Bavarian Air Force. But the Vierling Autokanone is one that I am going to include. It's just a small addition, but it is a weapon that has that gains the sustain quality when you're shooting at aerial units or skimming units, and the Scandinavians do use a few of those as well. When looking at the different generators, they are pretty much the same generators that every other faction can include. The Imperium does have the special storm generator mentioned below, but again that is tech mostly found on both Teutonic and Prussian ships, so the Scandinavians are not too concerned with these. But you can still get many different generators or swap them out should you so desire. One that is of particular interest to the Scandinavians is of course the Fury generator. Some ships, like the Ragnarok, actually comes with an inbuilt one, and it's a pretty nasty one because it gives you +1 speed to the attribute, which is already pretty good, and another +4 to the fray attributes. and that really makes those Scandinavians the close combat monsters that they are in this game. That's pretty much the playstyle as well of these, by the way, and I do plan to make a new updated video of the different playstyles for all the different factions, because the one I currently have was very popular, but slightly out of date. So if you want to see that one as well, make sure you hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for those future videos as well. And now, onto the different ships that the Scandinavians have access to, and we're starting with the first battleship, one that is actually out as well, which is the Ragnarok Heavy Reaver. It's still a very cheap flagship, as you can see, at only 233 points, and the stats haven't really changed all that much. This was one of those factions that already had some updated citadel values to go with, so there's not that many changes in this one. If you're new to this, by the way, and you see something written in blue in these things, that means there was a change compared to the previous version as well. And the only thing that really was changed was that there was a slight change to the distribution of hull points. It still has the same number of them, however, it's slightly easier to cripple them as well this time as well. But you'll see, it doesn't make much difference because they gained a few different rules. Now, as you can see, they also gained the surface trait, which makes total sense. I mean, that's new in version 3.03. They have swapped out any I don't know if they had any heavy magazines, but they've got heavy firepower now, so they can fire up to 3 weapons in lead value. However, this ship doesn't benefit that greatly for it, because in order for weapons to link up, they need to have the same qualities, and as you can see, this ship only has 2 heavy volt gun batteries, meaning that's the maximum number of weapons you're going to be able to stack due to this rule limitation. So don't really see this ship as a prime candidate for getting Valor cards to use that heavy firepower in this case. What does make it special though is that I now can take extra escort tokens for plus 8 points each, and those escort tokens can be upgraded to be those Pflicht Zeppelin aerial escorts, and then they'll set you back 10 points per escort. And again, discussed in my ORBAT changes and rules changes, escorts really are worth taking now because they help you with point blank shooting, and seeing as this ship is pretty much designed to go in for point blank shooting and assaults, getting escorts really is beneficial to them as well. They can of course swap out their heavy volt gun batteries with heavy shock rocket batteries, which are new, but I didn't include that weapon profile before simply because I don't think it is the smartest choice to make on this particular ship. And you can replace one of your heavy volt gun batteries with one of the generators. However, not that big of a fan of it because, you know, that forward firepower is pretty much what it needs to make those monstrous assaults. And there's no point in swapping one out to a Fury generator because it already has an inbuilt one. Like I mentioned at the top of the video, they don't really do disciplined crews, these Scandinavians. They've got the more aggressive crew type, and when they make an assault, this means they can reroll any blank results during that assault as well. On top of that, they've gained a new rule called Hammer Sweep, meaning during the activation this unit may increase its speed by 1 and gain +2 to its ramming dice pool, provided it makes no turns during the movement. That means that these ships have become even faster than they already were. I mean, you mustn't forget, this Ragnarok has a mass of 3, meaning that they drift 3 inches, and if we remember the battle fleet they had, you double the drift in the first turn with that set, meaning it's shooting up 6 inch on the board in turn 1. It's got speed 7 with that built-in Fury generator, so unless you're suffering from a down generator, you're moving at speed 8, which you can then bump up to be speed 9 by using the Hammer Sweep rule, and if you're able to deploy it in such a way that you can just bore on straight ahead to the enemy. Expect this ship to be in close combat in turn 2 if the enemy doesn't take it down in one go. So if you're watching this video and thinking like, how am I going to tackle those Scandinavians? Well, this is a pretty scary ship that's going to go just straight forwards. And they gained a new rule called Revel in Chaos, which means crippled models with this rule can still use the battle ready value of their weapons and any assaults made gain the devastating quality. So the funny thing is, once they get crippled and chaos erupts, they actually start doing better during assaults. Because if you're looking at the fray value, which is an oddity in this ship, it actually goes up as well. So the new distribution of hull points makes this definitely a more interesting ship that you can take down, or can try to take down, but you better make sure you take it down, because if you don't, these things are going to be even more aggressive than before, so beware. The next one is the Valhalla Fast Dreadnought. I wasn't able to include a picture of this model, which is something I decided to do because I heard somebody saying on the Sturginium Lounge that as a beginner it's hard to know which ship is which. So I try to include pictures whenever possible, but this is one of those preview ORBAT entries where you know where your faction's gonna go in the long term. There's no model out yet, and should you so desire, you can always play test with them as well. Now this Valhalla Fast Dreadnought is a very interesting option, because when it comes to the heavy firepower, that's a lot, isn't it? 2 big Sturmbringer on the front, which already is quite a lot of firepower, and then 3 heavy volt gun batteries, all neatly aimed at that front arc as well, meaning you can make some really good use of that heavy firepower. This ship isn't mucking about. I mean, the only thing it misses are torpedoes, but other than that, it's got some really scary firepower, and it can still take some extra escorts to bump up those Stormbringer batteries when you get in close range as well, making it a very scary entry. Now of course, it is a Mass 4 ship, so that probably explains why it's got so many different weapons on board as well. It comes with the aggressive crew that I've mentioned before, and you can take rocket battery upgrades as you do with these ships, and you can swap out for generators. But again, I wouldn't, because 3 heavy gun batteries is just perfect for that heavy firepower rule anyway. And a big deal now, this comes with the Fortunes of War rule, meaning it can both apply its own valor effects for heavy firepower, but it can also cancel any valor effects when this unit is battle ready. And when looking at the defensive stats, Armor 8 with Citadel 15. Citadel 15 slightly lower than you would like for Mass 4 Dreadnoughts, but still 9 hull points and Armor 8. It's not really something you blow away easily, so it's a very strong one as well. And, much like the Ragnarok, comes with its own internal fury generator, which cannot be replaced, so this speed of 6 is actually a speed of 7 as well. And with hammer sweep, so all the different things I was saying about the speed of the Ragnarok applies to this Valhalla Fast Dreadnought as well. And it's, as you can see, 5 different arc/voltaic weapons and fray 12 or even 13 makes it pretty scary. However, this ship does not have the Revel in Chaos rule like the Ragnarok had, so this one is a smart option to cripple should you be able to do so. So it's not like that Ragnarok where it can bite yourself, you can shoot yourself in the foot, I should say, if you cripple it too early. And another fun thing that it has is it's gonna get some Valley midget subs, and these Valley midget subs are gonna be special tokens or other tokens, but it only gets hit in the battle ready state, so an extra reason to try and aim for a cripple on this ship if you're facing it as well. Now what does it do? Well, you launch them like any SRS tokens, but with only 20-inch range, so you do have to get up close and personal with the enemy to launch them. But that's pretty much what this ship was designed to do, so I don't think that's a big downside, to be honest. And they make an attack run like SRS tokens, but with 5 action dice each, so you can be chucking 20 dice using these midget subs. And the attack run has the homing, piercing and submerged qualities. Now the submerged quality does mean that your opponent is going to be able to use its submerged defense value to protect against any hits caused by the subs. However, the big upside to that is the Valley midget subs cannot be intercepted like normal SRS tokens. Again, in the new rule set, you get a chance to shoot the ships out, or rather the aircraft out of the sky You can't do that because this is a submerged weapon. But it's not. That doesn't mean that you're left defenseless, because it's a submerged quality attack, as SDV can still be used. And they cannot make any attack runs on aerial units, and if that happens to become the case during the game, you have to find a new target. One such example is, for instance, the French skimmers. They can decide to become aerial units for a turn, and when they do, these submarines can no longer attack them, and they have to find a new target. So I think the moral here is, don't send them out to French skimmer units. Next up we have the Gungir Raider. It is that mandatory choice that we mentioned when you wanted to make the Ragnarok battle fleet and a bit of the workhorse for the Scandinavian fleet. It's quite a cheap ship now at 72 points, but there's been a few changes to them, not so much to the profile all around. It's still a very fast ship with a good amount of armor, but slightly lower citadel, as we've seen so far with all of these Scandinavian entries. And it is a very fragile ship because it's only got 3 hull points in both battle ready and crippled state. So that kind of explains the low point cost that you're paying for this one. This is pretty much like the smallest ship that you can build out of that cruiser set. And what do you get for it? Well, you get a heavy Sturmclaw and a Volt gun battery with some broadsides. But you can replace that Volt gun battery with the Sturmclaw for 3 points per model, bumping it up to 75. And I would do that because I've included the weapon stats now below. And when we're looking at the heavy Sturmclaw, it cannot link up with the Volt gun battery that comes on its standard. But it can if you upgrade that one to a Sturmclaw. And that's pretty much the clue to this whole thing. If you link those two up, you can get some pretty good firepower, albeit only aiming towards the front arc out of these models. And other than that, they pretty much behave like all Scandinavians do. I mean, you try to get to the enemy as fast as possible. You use hammer sweep to increase your speed, making them very fast small ships. And with power slide, you can sort of move 90 degrees to the left or the right when you're making your drift, while keeping your same facing. So that doesn't count as a turn, by the way, so that combines very well with that hammer sweep rule. You can just go, I'm going forward, and still have some level of maneuverability, albeit only 2" if you want to make some very small tweaks to your movement to evade an island or something like that. It's very much a unit that I like, and I think you can't really go wrong if you take a Ragnarok as your main flagship with 3 of these Gungir Raiders. Even if you don't have to take a unit of 3 of them, I don't think they're going to be a bad choice in the game at all. The next entry is actually a lengthy one to discuss, because it's the Hogmeister, the Vitruvian Colossus, one of the build option at least, if you buy that Imperium set. And let's be honest, they're some of the coolest models that the Imperium has, which is one of the reasons why I've included these here. And as you can see in that grey little box here, Scandinavian battle fleets can now include a single Hogmeister unit if they want to, and they gain the Scandinavian trait for doing so. Now, there's been a few changes to the stats. The ADV and SDV are no longer 0, and but that was the case in the previous rules change as well. They gained a few extra hull points in their crippled stat as well, and they've been bumped up quite a bit to 175 points. What did they gain for it? Well, they now have a Zweihander Greatsword. Now the Zweihander Greatsword is actually a ramming weapon that is supposed to be used on the turn they come in and just ram your opponent straight from the get-go. Now if you're a new player and you're wondering, how can this thing just ram something straight away? Well, it's got the unexpected arrival rule, like it says below. And what does that do? You can always keep it in reserves, and then when the reserve phase starts, which means after all the units have been activated, you can start rolling for any reserves. You can roll as you would normally, meaning on turn 1 they can come in if you're very lucky and roll an exploding hit. On any other turn, you normally would have to roll a hit, heavy hit or exploding hit for them to arrive, but these guys can do so automatically. You don't have to roll for it at all. And when it arrives, it doesn't have to arrive from any of the board edge like you would have to do with reserves. You can just put it anywhere in the play area if it's at least 2 inches from any of the nearest terrain features. So they do have to be in somewhat deep water. And then they can just activate. They can move, they can shoot, whatever they want. However, if they are shooting, you do have to use the crippled values, the crippled profiles of every weapon that they're shooting with. So if you're looking at the weapons they've got equipped, don't expect these heavy volt gun batteries to do a lot on the turn that they arrive. However, you don't have to use the crippled profile when you're making a ramming action though, and that's where that Zweihander Greatsword comes in, because that has ramming 12 along with the voltaic weapon quality, and that makes a very potent little ram action indeed on the turn you come in. You can technically, just as well, change one of your heavy volt gun batteries, should you so desire, with either a Fury, Magnetic, Shield or Shroud generator. And the Fury generator does kind of make sense, because you can come in with this model, you can ram, that's at full effect, that's not reduced by unexpected arrival. You can then shoot, that is at a reduced effect though, with the 2 heavy volt gun batteries, so why not change one of them out? And then you can still assault, should you so desire, and that's where that's not affected by the unexpected arrival rule, so that's still at full effect. And having a Fury generator to do so does help. Mind you, with only Fray 8, don't expect any miracles from them during the assault phase anymore. They're all about that ramming action now. Other than that, they've got a very cool new rule as well. They can be attached to a Metzger class, but ignore that. That's irrelevant to Scandinavians, because Scandinavians can't take Metzgers to begin with. What is very cool though is that Blitzschlag rule. What does it mean? It's a new Valor effect, so you do have to use one of your cards to activate it, with the activation number that is mentioned on the card. Any model in the unit with this rule that has caused at least 1 point of damage in a ramming action in this activation can then make a second ramming action against that same target. However, this is such a powerful ability that your opponent may always attempt to cancel it, even if they don't have any fortunes of warships or Devil's Own Luck or whatever. But if they don't have the card to stop this, this can do tremendous amount of damage, because like I said, this one's all about that ramming damage. Now there is one thing to note here, that Blitzschlag rule is lost if you upgrade the Zweihander Greatsword to a Kanzler Grand Maul. And what does the Grand Maul do? Well, it pretty much has the same stats as the Greatsword, but it gains the devastating quality to it as well. So expect one massive ram with one of those mauls, but you know, the weapons aren't quite as nimble and agile to make a double strike with them through the Blitzschlag rule, so your mileage may vary. Depends if you go like, I don't really have a fleet that uses a lot of Valor effects as a baseline, opt for the sword. If you're going, well, I do rely on a lot of heavy firepower units already, for instance, then you might be better off taking the maul weapon instead. But of course, as always, the best option is still to just magnetize the thing and just use both of them at the same time. Another thing that they can do, they're colossi, so they can just move and turn on the spot in any direction that they make, and they can always ram surface units and skimming units, even if they did not move more than 3 inches. So if your opponent, if you have to come in close to the opponent and you can't really get that maximum +5 ramming bonus, doesn't matter. Even if you had to start right next to the opposing ship, you can still do a ramming action. Might not be as effective, but it's still a ramming action regardless. It also has got the Vechtbug, meaning it's another Valor effect. Models with this rule gain +4 to their assault dice pool when making an assault. That massively compensates for that low fray value that I said and makes the Fury build more interesting. But again, you gotta be careful that you don't make one unit that's just gonna absorb all of your valor cards like a sponge, because that can happen with this unit very, very quickly. It's also inspirational, so any units that are found nearby can reroll dice, although in practice this rule is not nearly as impressive as it sounds, because you kind of want them to come in through unexpected arrival, and you can only use the reserve rules after everything else has activated already. So inspirational is neat, but not really that mandatory. And why do I say that you can use unexpected arrival a lot? It's got strategic withdrawal, so during the special operations phase it can always opt to go back into reserves, but it comes at a cost, because if any of those Hogmeisters were crippled already, you are losing them when doing so. They just abandon their teammates and leave them as they are to do that strategic withdrawal. So if you're facing them, crippling them is pretty much as good as killing them outright in this case. And they've got another big rule, which is the Zornhau. Each model in this unit may reroll blank results in attacks, which is anything really, ramming, any shooting, assaults, against surface units or ground units if they've got a mass of 2 or more. So they are specialized at trying to hit big things, which is exactly what you want to send these guys after. From the very largest thing available to the Scandinavians to the smallest one, which is the Hoth Heavy Corvette. Now, what does that bring you? Well, you get 2 Hoth Heavy Corvettes for 66 points, so they clock in at 33 points per model, which, for a frigate, is substantial, but nothing too bad compared to what other people are playing now. They're only armor 4 with Citadel 10, so again, slightly on the frail side, but they do come with 3 hull points now, so you can't just easily get rid of them through cheap old shots. Although breaching Citadel 10 these days in version 3.03 is not that hard to do either, so a dedicated amount of firepower from your opponent will see those ships sank rather quickly. Their biggest selling point though is the fact that they baseline come with a Sturmclaw, which is a very interesting weapon profile indeed, because it gains arc and devastating. Doesn't necessarily roll that many dice, but they are of high quality. And the most important thing, I think, is that the fact that they are an attached unit to any Scandinavian ship as well. So when building a force, this unit may become a joining unit to anything Scandinavian. And there's quite a few ships in the Scandinavian lists that use heavy Sturmclaw or regular Sturmclaw, so attaching another 2 extra Hoth Heavy Corvettes onto them can really create a very devastating unit indeed. And like all Scandinavian units, they now benefit from hammer sweep, so they're going to get to the other side quite quickly, which means that you can also use them to enhance the assaults that you're already doing to begin with. There's only one caveat with this one, and that's the fact that the Ragnarok battle fleet and the standard Imperium battle fleet only allows for you to take this unit once. So if you're going to use them as an attached unit, you're only using 2 heavy Corvettes out of that whole battle fleet box that you've bought. So the option of just using a unit of 6 of them might be smarter if you want to maximize the amount of models you're getting from that box. That's just a small thing if you're a new player. If you're using the attached rule, you might be left with a lot of those Hoth Corvettes sitting on the shelf because of that. Next up we have the Odin Heavy Raider, and this is the Scandinavian equivalent of the full option pizza when you're ordering online, because this is the biggest version that you can build out of the cruiser squadron. And what does that get you? Well, it gets you that heavy Sturmclaw mounted in the front, as you can see. It comes with a standard heavy volt gun battery, but much like with the Gungir, I would assume that you upgrade that one to the Sturmclaw, and then it comes with still a heavy volt gun battery as well on the top there. And of course, because it's a cruiser, it comes with broadsides as well. And all of the rules that we've seen before, like hammer sweep and aggressive crew, also apply to this Odin Heavy Raider. They clock in at 111 points, however, with that almost mandatory upgrade in my book, to upgrade the volt gun battery to a Sturmclaw, they clock in at 114. and for that money you get a cruiser that is on the expensive end of the scale for the amount of defensive stats that it has. But again, defensive is not the sort of playstyle you should be aiming for if you decide to go for the Scandinavians, because that really isn't what they do. They do get a nifty little bonus though. They gain focused gunnery, so a single attack with the gunnery quality by this unit, each activation can get +2 action dice. And like I said, if you take a unit of 3 of those and you attach some Hoth heavy Corvettes to them, and then use focused gunnery with all of the Sturmklau and the heavy Sturmklau combined, you can get a pretty nifty and heavy attack out of this unit as well. So if you want to play around with that option, you definitely can. But mind you, you still have to get at least 1 Gungir for that Ragnarok battle fleet. But, you know, as a purchasing suggestion, if you want to get into Scandinavians, it's not a bad idea to get a Ragnarok and then an additional squadron, frontline squadron from the Scandinavians, and then you can perfectly build 3 Jotuns and still have your mandatory Gungir covered as well. So, yeah, it's an option if you're starting out with them, and an interesting at that. The next one is an entry that is not yet released, which is why there is no available picture next to it as well, and that is the Loki Shadow Raider. Now, it clocks in at 110 points, and it's got similar defensive stats like you saw before with the Jotun as well, and it's only slightly cheaper. So what's the main difference? Well, when you're looking at the different weapon loadouts, you can see that it has lost its normal Volt Gun Battery / Sturmklau upgrade that you would get, but you do get something else out of it as well. This one now comes equipped with a Shroud Generator, meaning that it in the new rule set will always be obscured against attacks, except of course if it's an Assault or an SRS attacker run. And a very interesting one if you want to put your opponent on a wrong footing, which is why the Loki name is very applicable here. It's Shadow Hunter. Once both sides have deployed, but before you make any vanguard moves, players take it in turn, in initiative order in other words, to redeploy a unit with this rule. Now the Japanese largely use this rule. That can be a very frustrating thing when you're fighting against them, and you can sort of mimic that with this Loki Shadow Hunter, so they're never quite sure where you're going to strike if you use this this ship. So it's going to be an interesting entry once those do become available, and you know, given that they are mass 2 as well, they should be fairly easy to proxy should you want to try them out. A build option that is available on the frontline squadron though is the Odin Reaver, which is the same weapon loadout as the Loki that we previously saw, but clocks in quite a bit cheaper and only really loses 1 hull point in the crippled state. So if these become crippled, they do drop down significantly in stats, as you can see, but they're only, well, they're sub 100 points, which is never bad for any cruiser ships. And they come with the heavy Sturmklau and the heavy Volt Gun Battery. As you can see here, it's that build option. The good thing about them though is they do have that Vanguard rule, so if you're looking at something that can cross the board very, very quickly, the Odin Reaver with Vanguard can do that for you as well. And it does have those heavy Volt Gun batteries, so this is a slightly more flexible unit at the range option as well. You can use this ship as a medium range combatant for a while you're closing in the gap as well, so it is a good source of first turn firepower, which is something that you'll traditionally lack if you're a Scandinavian player. And the final Scandinavian entry into the ORBAT is one that also is not yet released, so there's pretty much more Scandinavian releases on the way, we can definitely tell that. And that's the Valkyrie Huntrotor. Now the Valkyrie is a mass 1 flying ship, and like the description says, the Prussians and the Bavarians prefer to use dirigibles, zeppelins in other words, for their aerial warfare. The Scandinavians will deploy Valkyrie Huntrotors to support their rapid operations. Now rotors are it's pretty much almost a helicopter type of craft, because the Union uses those quite a bit. And they have been changed. They've gotten a lot more expensive. It's 48 points for a Mass 1 ship, so at that point you're sort of looking at the Citadel straight away. It's Citadel 11, that's doable. I mean, your opponent is going to have to put in some effort to one-shot them, but they now come with 2 of those Stormclaw on the front, so that is a lot of firepower, especially when combined with that Fearling autocannon, and the fact that you can make squadrons out of 6 out of them. You do have a unit that can pack a wallop, but they don't come in cheap, and they are reasonably fast and very, very agile with that turn 10, turn limit of 10 that you can use during the drift phase as well. So navigating the battle fleet is going to be dirt easy with these things. So I can't wait until those Scandinavian, the second Scandinavian fleet I should say, is released, because I'm absolutely in love with the miniatures that they've released so far for them. And there you have it, the first ORBAT deep dive that I've done. Again, if you like this new format, make sure you mention it in the comments as well, because I think it's going to be more manageable. I've heard a few people in the Sturginium Lounge saying, like, we do want to see a slightly different order, like in per nation, so I tried to do that with the ORBAT deep dives. So expect to see one for definitely the Teutonic order as well, and the Prussian order, which is going to be a big one. It is slightly more work for me personally to make all of these different screenshots, but hopefully this helps to keep things manageable in terms of video length and gives you a better idea of, like, what if I'm not really interested in the Imperium at large and I just want to focus on those Scandinavians. So hopefully you like it. Again, make sure to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!